Okay, thank you very much, Siu Yi. I just want to make sure, can everybody see my screen? Okay. I'm very excited to see that we have almost 24 business people or wannabe business people in the webinar today. So great work on the part of the Davis Chamber to bring people in. And I also see there's people from some of the publications in Yolo County. I understand this is for everybody in Yolo County. That's great. So this is the very first of a series of sessions, and I'll just move down here. But of course, the very first thing I have to do is the legal stuff, right? So I'm only going to read this the first time. After this time, I'm not going to read it again, but we have to put it up on the screen every time. So this information is provided in this webinar, and any supplementary materials that are provided are intended for educational and informational purposes. They do not constitute financial or legal advice. So no registrant should act or fail to act on the basis of any material contained in this webinar without obtaining proper financial, legal, or other professional advice specific to their situation. And one more paragraph. The Northern California SBDC and their host organizations disclaim any liability, loss, or risk, personal or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence, directly or indirectly, of the use and application of any of the information presented in this webinar. So, got the legal part out of the way. Tell you a little bit about SBDC. So the Sacramento Valley SBDC serves 4 counties, Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba. And there's no cost one-on-one advising. We have a range of business advisors in a number of specialty areas and also speaking a number of languages. I focus primarily on business planning and marketing channels, and I can counsel participants in English and Spanish. So we're one of 18 service centers in Northern California that covers 36 counties. That's basically the whole top half of the state. And we operate several special programs, a restaurant program, finance center, tech future center, and there's a brand new one called the Inclusivity Project for Black and African American business people or entrepreneurs. So I mentioned we have specialties, there's startup, there's my area, human resource, marketing, another area of mine, finance and bookkeeping. And I mentioned that we have a number of languages available: Spanish, Hindi, Hmong, Vietnamese, and Arabic. And we have our website there, telephone number, and the email address. So just want to mention to you, you will be getting a copy of these slides, and you also have access to the recording. So you will have all this information available to you even after today. Going on to the next slide. So this is just a little bit about me. So I've been working for over 20 years as a manager, a consultant, and a professor. I worked in a Fortune 500 company as a manager and taught at a number of places, including UC Davis, Sac State, and others. I have an MBA from Case Western Reserve University. And I think there's one other paragraph down here, which I have to hide my floating meeting control so I can see it. So I do currently teach at Sac State and Sacramento City College. I've also taught at the Davis campus, lovely new Davis campus of Sacramento City College out there on the west side of Davis. Okay, let's see if we get on to the next slide. There we go. So just say a little bit about Corey. So he is the executive director of the Davis Chamber, and he's got almost 28 years of executive experience, and that includes nonprofit management, state and legislative advocacy, strategic communications, fundraising, and he worked as the chief lobbyist for the Rental Housing Association before he came to the chamber. And I see here that he has a bachelor's degree from UC Davis. That's great. Go Aggies. But I don't quite understand why he didn't go to Davis for his JD, but that's okay, Cora, that's okay. All right, so this is a series. This is the first one. And the next one is going to be on February 22nd. So they're every other week for 5 sessions. They're always 11:30 to 1, always at the same link. And the next one is, the next one's called Planning Your Business. So like I say, every other Wednesday until April 5th. So I want to tell you a little bit about the flow of the workshop. So this first one is going to be mostly informational, but as we work through the 5 sessions, they're going to be more and more action oriented and asking you to do more and more things to help your business either start or grow. So the sessions, this one's starting your business, then we're going to planning, financing, marketing, and then more on financing, which is financial management of the business itself. So again, the flow is we start with information, and then as we move along, we get more and more into the action phase. Okay, so a little bit about using the Zoom webinar and interacting with us. You'll see there's something here on the bottom called raise hand. So if you need to say something out loud, please do that. You can also put questions in the Q&A. If you have questions for me, please put them in the Q&A box. And any other comments or questions you have for anybody, then please put them in the chat. I'm going to try to at least respond to the ones that go into the Q&A box. And then you can raise and lower your hand like that. So if you have any questions about how to do that, please put those in the Q&A. And actually, since I am sharing full screen, I can't see the Q&A now or the chat, but Suyi, you can see those both, right? And let me know if I need to respond to anything.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. So there's the Q&A part, and there's the chat part. And you can go either to just the panelists, which would be Suyi and myself, or to everybody in the chat. Okay, here's the agenda. So we did some introductions. People put their names and their businesses and where they are in the chat. Anybody else who has not done that and you want to do that, that would be great. It's a great way to network. People learn about other businesses. Maybe they want to connect with you. You can share your contact information in the chat. And we're doing the course overview. So there's a self-discovery process that we're going to start with. We're going to move on to the legal stuff. You know, you have to make your business legal and make sure it stays legal. You don't want any lawsuits or prosecutions or anything, right? And then we get into sort of the meat of how the meat or the tofu, right, of how you turn your business idea into reality. Now, some of you already have, but some of you want to, and that's great because that's what I hope we'll be able to help you do starting today. And then turning the idea into a business plan. And we'll talk about what a business plan is and the importance of a business plan as we go along. And then we'll wrap up. So if anybody has any questions or concerns about the agenda, you can feel free to put those in the, if you have a question in the Q&A or anything else in the chat, and then if I have to address something about it, I'll be glad to do it. Okay, so there's some objectives for today. By the end of this, the whole 5 sessions, actually, you are going to be able to, actually for this session, sorry, evaluate how well suited you are to launch and run your own business, understand the steps you'll need to take to access your business idea, make decisions about the legal structure, licenses, and permits that you need, and also decide what kind of business plan you're most likely going to need to create. You might actually need to have more than one, depending on what you're going to be doing with your business and especially the financing for your business. So that's what we're going to cover today. Okay, so like everybody now, well, actually we've done this pretty much, but if anybody wants to put something in the chat, please do that. Why you're here and where you are on your journey. You're in the idea stage, you're starting now, you've been in business for a while, and what kind of business. So if you haven't put any of that stuff in there already, please do that. And Suyi, are you able to run the poll?
No, John, I don't.
Okay, well, that's all right. That's what we're asking people to do in the poll. So if you could just put those in the chat, that would be great. And we're going to keep a copy of the chat. And so actually, Suyi, if you could download the chat at the end, that would be great. And then, you know, there are things we need to respond to afterwards. We can do that.
Okay.
Okay, so we help businesses with all kinds of things. If you start at the top here, getting money, whether it's advice about putting your own money in or getting money from friends and family. We'll talk about sources of money as we go on to financing. loans, grants, not very many grants, but there's some, and equity investment. Doing your research, marketing, certification. For example, there's various kinds of small business and other certifications that could be useful to you. Growing your business, and then the issue of business continuity. What are you going to do when you're not going to have that business anymore? So there's all kinds of things we can help businesses with. So we do that in one-on-one advising. I mentioned that I and quite a number of other people are advisors here in the Sacramento Valley SBDC. All that is by advising is free, and you can contact the SBDC and start that process. So we usually have 1 hour scheduled sessions, and they're for as long as there's continued progress in the business. So usually get homework from the advising sessions, and then you do the homework, and then if you do that and you need more help, then you set up another session. And they're completely confidential. I have to write up a very general report, but I don't even put a lot of specifics in that report. And the only people who see that are the SBD advisors and staff. And I don't tell anybody else about your business, and I don't go into specific details about your business in that report. And we also have mostly free, but some low-cost workshops as well, on all kinds of topics, like the ones that I talked about when you saw that diagram in the last slide.
John?
Yes.
Quick question. Would you like me to launch the poll?
Oh, if you can, yes. If you can, yes, please.
Okay. So this is poll number 1. 2 questions. Are you able to see the poll?
I can see it.
Okay.
So if anybody can't see the poll, please type in the chat that you can't see it. And if you can see it, please answer the 2 questions. And then I think there's a submit button after you answer the questions. So we're starting to get responses coming in fast and furious. So far, I know the business I want to start. That's the highest ranked one. And somebody's looking, the biggest ones categories are non-food retail business and a service business. We have people all over the map there, just looking at the option of self-employment, thinking of starting a business. I have an idea for a business, or the big one again is I know what business I want to start. And then again, non-food retail business is biggest, and service business is next. So let's just take 1 more minute. Like 3/4 of you have put your answers in there, but this should give 1 more minute, see if anybody wants to. So again, there's just 2 questions. I think you click on 2 radio buttons and then click submit. Okay, we got 1 more, so that definitely brings us to 3/4. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So as mentioned before, that people in every category, but mostly people know the business they want to start. Some of you have already started. And again, the big one is non-food retail, and then service businesses, and then there's something else. So if that was a something else, please put that in the chat if you haven't already. Thanks so much, Sui, for doing that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so what's the goal of the SBDC? Why is it that we provide all these services for free? Well, we do it because the taxpayers pay for it. And why do they do that? Because the government, both the federal and state government, have decided that it's in the best interest of the community to help businesses grow and thrive. There's more tax money, there's more services, there's more products available, money stays in the local economy. So those are all good things. So there's some things we measure to determine how much economic impact the SBDC is making and its client businesses are making. And that includes the number of businesses started. So if you haven't started a business and you're working with the SBDC, like with an SBDC advisor, we will send you a survey, I think once a quarter, and ask you, if you haven't had a business before, but now you've actually started it, and we have some certain questions about what that means. That's something we measure. We also measure jobs created. So if you are working in your business, that even if it's part-time, that's a job that's created. And if you have you and other people working there, and then the following quarter, those people are still working there, those may not be new jobs created, but they're jobs saved. And if we create new ones, those are counted as well. Also, increase in sales, very important. You might start out small and get bigger. I mean, we can think of one of the biggest businesses in the world. Jeff Bezos started selling books out of his garage. His sales have increased somewhat since then, and that's the kind of thing we measure. And then the capital you've obtained, and that can include money that you put in, friends and family, and any investment or loans or grants that you got. So these are the things that we measure, and those are the things that we send out the survey about every quarter. And it's very important that clients complete that survey, because that helps determine whether the federal and state governments are going to keep funding the SBDC to provide these services to you. So there's some things that you can do to tip the balance in your favor in terms of whether you're going to be open for business or if you end up getting closed down. One of the most important things is a business plan. And I'll talk a lot more about that next week, but a little bit about it today. You got to have cash, whether it's yours or somebody else's. You got to have money to start a business. Some businesses don't take very much. Some businesses take a lot. You have to have commitment to your business. You can't be just, oh yeah, well, maybe you have to really be committed to what you're doing. You have to be willing to compete you have to know the competition and be willing and able to compete with them in a way that gets you more business. You might need employees besides yourself. You have to keep records. That's for your purposes, but it's also for governmental purposes, for tax purposes, and also for getting capital to your business. You need the skills and experience. Either you or other people that you work with need to have the skills and experience necessary to make the business a success. So just as an example, several years ago, I decided that there needed to be a new, more effective, safer, and more environmentally friendly sunscreen brand. But I don't know. I'm not a chemist. I don't know how to make a sunscreen. So I had to go find people who knew how to do this. So it could be you, and it could also be you and other people. You need marketing, very important. Maybe marketing and sales are after the business plan. Marketing sales might be the most important things, because if you don't have customers, you don't have a business. You have to budget, because you're going to have limited funds. You don't want to run out of money. That sends you up in the closed down category. So you have to manage your cash, and you have to get out of your comfort zone. There might be some things you need to do that are not comfortable for you to do. So you just need to, be willing and able to go ahead and do that. Okay, so there's a self-discovery process you need to go through to see whether you're in the position to be an entrepreneur. So there's the self-assessment, there's the financial assessment, the market assessment, and finally the feasibility of your product or service. So the first one is, how good a fit are you for starting a business? You have the personality for it. Some people do, some people don't. We're going to talk at some point about Steve Jobs and lesser known name, Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak was the technical person in the business at the very beginning of Apple, and Jobs was more the marketing person. As you may know about Steve Jobs, he had an incredible personality for putting out a message that people wanted to hear, and Steve Wozniak was not in that category, but he was a technical genius, and so between the two of them, they were able to make the business happen. I mentioned skills and experience, money and resources I also mentioned. And you have to decide if you want to be an entrepreneur, or maybe you'd rather be an employee. You could be an employee of a startup or some other business, right? But that's a determination that you need to make for yourself. So you have to think about what your values are. What your values are. So you have to think about all those things. Okay. And let me just see if this self-evaluation works. We had a problem with the link, but I think it works now. So when you get these slides, you will get this link, and there's no like scoring at the end, but it's just a way to, it's a way to determine, if you get high scores on most of these, you're probably going to be, good as an entrepreneur. If you get lower scores, maybe not. The one thing I would correct on here is, and you'll see it's corrected in the slides, it says here you have to have strong physical stamina and strength. I don't think it's necessary to have a strong physical strength, but it certainly is important to have stamina because you have to keep going at what you're doing. So here's some characteristics of a successful entrepreneur. You have to focus on your business, be competitive, be a leader. You may have employees, and even just being in an organization like the Chamber of Commerce, it's helpful if you're a leader, right? You get on committees, you get on the board, things like that. You have to be independent. You have to make your own decisions. You have to be able to solve problems all the time. The drive to succeed, emotional strength, physical stamina, self-discipline. So you need a lot of characteristics to be a successful entrepreneur, and you have to be objective about which of these you have and maybe which ones you don't have, or you might be able to find in a partner or someone else who works with you. So let's talk about skills and experience. So there's certain skills that are needed, and the main ones are sales, because you don't have a business without sales. Marketing, because you usually don't have sales without marketing. You have to manage the company, plan all the time, and make changes in your plans. And you have to be adaptable because the market changes. I mean, look what happened when COVID hit. Everything changed. Restaurants closed, other businesses closed. But some of them were very successful. Some of them ended up having drive-through or delivery or curbside pickup, things like that. So you want to ask yourself the question, how has your experience so far brought you to the place that you are, and do you have these skills? And if not, what areas do you need help in? And where will you get it? So SBDC is one place you can get it, and then there's other places you can get it as well. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between employee and self-employed. So an employee follows instructions, but somebody who's self-employed decides what instructions are to be followed by themselves and by others if they have employees, right? Employees usually work a 40-hour week, but self-employed people work the hours necessary to become successful. I remember in one business I used to have a silkscreen printing business. And one of my partner was a graphic artist. And I remember she showed me this cartoon, which we now call a meme, right? That said, "Oh, you're a graphic artist. You know what? That's great. You know, your own boss, you make your own decisions, you set your own hours." And the graphic artist says, "Yeah, any 23 hours a day I want," right? So you don't necessarily have to work 23 hours a day, but you do have to work the hours that are necessary to be successful in your business. So if you're an employee, the employer decides when you work. When you're self-employed, you decide when you work. Usually an employee is paid by the hour, or maybe they have a salary, and self-employed, they're paid if the company makes money, and they're paid last. And employees don't usually invest in the company, but self-employed people usually do. Okay, so let's talk about your personal values and goals and how they relate to the business. So which issues matter most to you? Family? If so, maybe a home-based business would be better for you, or one that you can include your family in. Are your talents important to you? Which talents do you want to use in your business? Where do you want to live and work? Davis is a great place. Yolo County is a great place. You have to decide where you want to be. I saw there was somebody from Winters. Winters is great too. Okay, so do you need the income right now? Because if you need it right now, you might want to be an employee. But if it's okay that it takes a little while to get that income coming in, then maybe a business is a good proposition for you. So let's talk about where the money is going to come from. Usually the initial money comes from you, which is sometimes referred to bootstrapping, from pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. Oftentimes it comes from family and friends. or other people, maybe your family and friends know. So all of this is the other people's equity part, right? And then there's crowdfunding, which I'm going to get into in some detail in the financial session later. Angel investors, because I guess they're called angels because they come and help you before anybody else does. And then there's venture capital, which is the big money, right? And there's also loans. And I mentioned there are some grants as well for businesses. And again, Suyi, if there are any questions along the way that you think I need to answer, please let me know.
I will, John.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about loans. So there's a number of different kinds of loans available. It's just a regular old bank loan. You go into a bank. There's plenty of them in Davis and other places in Yolo County. You just go in and you apply for a loan, right? There are commercial finance companies. Some of them might be okay. Some of them you might need to watch out for. I'll mention some of those later. There are micro enterprise loans for very, very small businesses. There's economic development loans, and there's small business administration loans. And the nice thing about SBA loans is that SBA guarantees the loan. So what that means is that banks are more likely to loan and maybe on more favorable terms. Even though the SBA guarantees the loan, the borrower is still obligated to pay. Okay, and then if you're going to be applying for a loan, you want to learn about the loan process. It can be complicated. And you want to get your credit report and your credit score. And if your credit score, so the higher your credit score, the more likely it is you'll get a loan and the better terms you'll get and the more money you'll be able to get. So if your credit score, and you can talk, if you're already with a bank or a credit union that does business lending, then what you can do is ask them, here's my financial situation. They can see your credit score. I think if you authorize them to, and then ask them, do I need, if I was going to get a loan here, for example, would I need better credit, a better credit score, better credit history, and how much better does it need to be? And then, how can I make it better? And there's lots of information about their Consumer Reports, by the way, I think is a good source. And I think they have free information about credit repair so that you can move your credit score up. You want to make sure you have your business plan, and you want to make sure you have at least 3 years of financial history. So if you're an ongoing business, you may have that for the business. If not, then you'll need it for your own personal life, your own personal finances, because they're going to know if you've got, we'll get into it more later, but they're going to know, do you have the ability to repay a loan? Okay, so in addition to figuring out how you're going to get capital, you have to do a market assessment as well. So you think about, so where did your idea come from? So let me give you the example from mine for the sunscreen. So several years ago, I had skin cancer surgery on my face. It was awful. So as soon as that happened, I said, no, I need to get the best sunscreen there is, right? So I went to Consumer Reports. They also rate sunscreens. I found the best ones. I went out and bought them. And then the next thing that happened was a few months later, Hawaii and some other jurisdictions banned the most effective sunscreens because they kill coral. I went, this might be a business opportunity. But I didn't know how to make sunscreen, so I didn't do anything about it. But that's where the idea came from. So what will you do better than the other companies? Well, the idea was to have an effective sunscreen that doesn't kill coral. Have you seen the idea used elsewhere? Well, yes, there are sunscreens that don't kill coral, but they're not very effective, like titanium and zinc. They don't kill coral, but they're not nearly as effective as the chemical sunscreens that do kill coral. Can I clearly articulate the idea? I hope so. I mean, it's basically the idea is the first, how do I like to say it? The first safe, effective, environmentally friendly sunscreen. Do you understand the industry? So this took a lot of research. We had to figure out what are the biggest brands, who owns them, what are the chemical compositions of their products, how effective are they? Got a lot of useful information from Consumer Reports about that. There's market reports you can buy for thousands of dollars. We didn't do that, but we did a lot of information, did a lot of study about the sunscreen industry. The next question is your idea feasible? So you have to figure out, so who are your customers or your potential customers? And you have to talk to them and find out, this is the most important thing. Talk to them and find out. Don't say, would you buy my product? Because people like to be nice to other people and they say, oh, sure, I'll buy your product, right? But then you say, okay, give me $10 for this tube of sunscreen. Then, well, I don't have $10 on me, or I already got sunscreen or whatever, right? So you want to talk to people, but you don't want to say, would you buy my stuff, right? You want to say, you will tell me about, like, when you go out in the sun. We'll get into more of this later, but you want to find out, are they customers, right? So are you entering a market that has more demand than supply? Our hope is that there will be lots of people who want a safe, effective environmentally sunscreen, and there isn't one right now. So that would indicate that demand would be greater than supply. What will you do better than your competitors? Well, I talked about that in my case. And are there unmet needs? I think I talked about that. And you want to talk to family and friends, customers, and talk to the competition, learn from them, right? You can do it as a research project, right? The other thing is, but just be careful with family and friends, because they will really want to tell you what they think you want to hear, right? They want to make you happy. So don't ask them if they would buy it. Ask them about their experience with the thing that your product or service would help them with. Like in my case, tell me about when you and your family go to the beach. Tell me about that. And then I sort of lead it into talking about sun and UV rays, and then see what they have to say. So you can ask all kinds of people, your personal support network, people you know, right? Includes family. You might have a significant other you can talk to, friends or other business owners who can give good advice, right? It could be businesses that are complementary to yours. Like, for example, I could go to a store that sells, I don't know, bathing suits, and maybe they sell sunscreens. You go to Target, you might not get some great advice from, but if you go to a store like that, they might say, oh yeah, our customers come in and they're concerned about this and that kind of stuff. And then that store might become a customer of our product. And then a professional support network. So the reason I gave that disclaimer at the beginning is because we don't give legal advice. We are not lawyers. There might be some business advisors who are lawyers, but I'm not, and I can't give legal advice. I'm also not certified as a financial advisor, so I can't give, I'm not a CPA, for example, so I can't give you like financial advice, like take this to the bank. Also, you might want technological advice. A lot of people are making tech-related businesses, websites, e-commerce, things like that. It might be something that you don't completely have a handle on, and you may need to get help in that area. And the SBDC is always here for all kinds of support that you need. Now, I did say I'm not a CPA, don't ask me for financial advice, but there are advisors in SBDC who have significant financial expertise, including CPAs and other people with financial credentials. And so we can definitely help you with that. A lot of people also have like experience with e-commerce and website work and things like that.
John,
Yes.
before you move on, we have a question in the Q&A.
Yeah.
Assuming we have good credit, what is the best type of loan to strive for? Lower APR, best terms, or etc.?
Well, I think the SBA loan is the best because it's guaranteed by the SBA, which means the bank has much less risk. I think the SBA guarantees up to 85% of the loan. So that makes a bank very comfortable with, much more comfortable with giving you a loan. And for that reason, they may well give you better terms. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I would agree that if you have good credit, you make a very good loan candidate with any financial institution. And there was a question in the chat that I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge earlier. There is an attendee who asked if this training series would be appropriate for starting a nonprofit organization.
I think so. I'm not really going to be talking about nonprofits specifically, but I would say so. There are couple of aspects about nonprofits that are different. One is that in a certain sense, nonprofits have two sets of customers. They have their clients, the people they serve, who are the end users, but they also have the people who give them money, which may or may not be their clients. So they might have donors or foundations or things like that. So you have to think about customers in two different ways. There are also businesses that have two sets of customers. Businesses that are marketplace businesses have two sets of customers, like Facebook or Uber. They've got the users, and then they have the people who provide the content, right? And then, so that's one difference. But I would say that almost everything that's in here can be valuable for a nonprofit. There's some things that might be specific to businesses, but there's a lot of valuable information for nonprofits as well. Okay, I want to talk to you about Ernesto Ceroli. He lives in Sacramento, by the way. He's one of the top TED Talk people. And one of the things he says is there's only one thing that all the successful companies of the world have in common, and that is none was started by one single person, right? So I want to talk about a little bit more about this in some detail. So I mentioned before about Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. So this is what Ceroli calls this three-legged stool here, which I understand is the most stable kind of thing to sit on. Calls it the Trinity of management. And so first you have your product or your service. So in this case, Steve Wozniak was the guy who created the product, right? So I just want to tell you a little story about Apple and how this relates to not being just one person. So not many people know that Apple's first product was called Captain Crunch. And it was called Captain Crunch because back in the days of touch tone phones, when you wanted to make a long distance call, because these were toll calls, right? So there was a certain set of tones that got you into the long distance, wiring, right? And so it turned out that there was a whistle in the Captain Crunch cereal boxes that could make that tone or those tones, whatever it was. So they made a machine to do that. They made like a little mini computer thing to do that. That was their first product. It was illegal, but they took the money from that. And Steve Wozniak said, people are starting to make more and more computers. The first computer was like a block long, right? But they're making more and more computers and smaller computers, and there's a real market for motherboards. I can make them, but they're expensive. And Steve Jobs says, okay, because he was the marketer, right? Steve Jobs says, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to sell some. And if I sell them, and then we have contracts, then you make them, right? Because they didn't have enough money for that. So that's what he did. He went out and he sold 20 motherboards, and then they had the contracts. And so Steve Wozniak made the motherboards and they sold them. But then you need finance. So I would say the first thing you need is your product or your service. The second thing you need is marketing and sales. Usually entrepreneurs are good at their product or service, but maybe not as good in the other areas. So the next thing you need after the product or service person is you need a marketing and salesperson if you are not one. And then once you start getting money or you start wanting to raise money, then you need somebody to manage money. And I put this guy, I forgot his name. I've put this guy's picture on here. I met him a couple of times. He's the highest up person in finance in Apple that I ever met. He's the head of tax. He's left now, but if you ever saw that Senate hearing where Senator McClain asked Tim Cook and this guy, why do I have to keep updating the system on my iPhone, right? Well, this is the guy who was sitting next to Tim Cook answering the questions about why they were stashing all that money in the tax haven of Ireland. But that was part of their financial strategy. Legal, but not very acceptable to the US government, right? Okay, so these are three things you absolutely have in your business, and you have to make sure that, and I think in this order. Okay, self-discovery. So you have to make a self-assessment, right? It includes an assessment about you, your finances, and your ability to raise capital from various sources, your market, and the feasibility of doing this. Like, can you actually do it, right? Just like Wozniak said, I can do it. And job says, oh, go get the contracts and then we'll have the money lined up and then you can do it. And your team, this is very important. You want to make sure everybody on your team is a rock star. Fortunately for me, I found a UC Davis professor who had the rest of us, there's 5 of us on the team. The rest of us all think is a brilliant idea to solve the sunscreen problem. So he's our rock star technical person, right? So we're going to do a knowledge check and we have a second poll. Sui, can you run that poll?
Sure. Give me 1 second. Poll number 2 coming up. Bootstrapping your business.
Right, there you go. So let me, sorry, get that out of the way. Okay, so, where are you gonna get your money? You're gonna put it in yourself, you're gonna get a loan, equity, some kind of investment, or maybe some other way, right? And then if you get it, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a quiz, I'm sorry. If you're financing your new business from your existing resources, what is it called? And then there's, if you get money or something else of value from someone in return for part ownership, what is that called? And which of these is likely to be part of your personal support network? And that's a different question. That's family, lawyer, significant other, friends or business owners, or business banker. So we've got 8 people so far. We'll look at that poll again in a minute. And by the way, Sui, are people able to unmute and talk if they want to?
I believe I have the ability to unmute them.
Okay, so great. So if they see, I see something that gives me reactions and then raise hand. So if they raise their hand and they want to ask a question, and you unmute them, then they can do that.
And then there is Amy. I'm sorry if I butcher your first name. She's saying that the polls aren't showing up on her screen for some reason.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know why that is. Maybe if you click on, do you see polls at the bottom? If you do, click on that.
So Amy, you have to go to the bottom of your Zoom screen where it has 3 dotted line that says more. And if you click on that, it should show the poll question.
So if anybody can't see the poll still, please put in the Q&A, I can't see the poll. Okay, so now we have 15 people. We have a few more people than we had before, so it's not quite 3/4, but we have about 2/3 of the people. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And then can you see the poll results on the screen? I'm going to tell you what they are. So almost everybody said if you're financing your business from your existing resources, that is bootstrapping. The second one is if you're getting money or something else of value from someone in return for part ownership of your business, that is in fact equity. That was the top choice. And we have a good mix of sources of information people are choosing. Most were, the largest number was family, but we also, close to that was friends or business owners who give good advice. After that was a significant other or business banker. And then finally, there still were also some people who had their lawyer as the person. So I just shared the results. That's up on the screen. And I'm going to go ahead and close this in just a moment and get back to the slideshow. Okay. Okay, let's go on. I've got to hide my floating meeting controls one more time. So if there's any questions at this point, please put them in the Q&A or raise your hand if that is available to you. And let's see what questions we have before we go on. Okay, so let's go into the legal part, legal structures and licenses. So there's four basic types of companies, right? There's the sole proprietorship. That has to be just one person. It's very inexpensive to set up. If your last name is in it, you do not have to we'll get into this a little later, but you don't have to get what's called a fictitious name or a doing business as. You have to do anything about that if your last name is in the business, otherwise you do. Not a lot of an admin, and you just get taxed. You just use your social security number and you just get taxed. But there are some disadvantages, and that is that there's unlimited liability. So for that and a partnership, if you are in a risky business where something bad might happen to one of your customers, right? Let's say you're in the, I don't know, the skydiving business or the bungee jumping business, right? You want to either get an LLC or a corporation, or you want to have a lot of liability insurance, right? Same thing is true for partnerships. And also there are limited tax benefits, and there's no tax benefits for partnerships. And the other thing that's bad about a partnership is that you are liable for what your partners do as well as what you do, right? So in a partnership, if there are two or more people, then you probably want to set up a partnership. It's not very costly, not a lot of admin, and just like a sole proprietorship, it's just taxed to the owners on their social security numbers. Next one is a limited liability company. And the nice thing about this and a corporation is that if somebody sues you, the most they can win is what the company has. They can't go after your house. They can't go after your bank account, the personal stuff that you own, because it's the LLC or the corporation that is the liable party, not you. And LLCs are usually taxed to the owners. Corporations are taxed to the corporation. Both of them can be costly to form. Both of them can require a significant amount of administrative duties, and there is an annual tax. In California, the very least you would pay is an $800 a year fee to the Secretary of State's office to have an LLC or corporation. I think that's waived, or it's like $50 or something the first year, but after that, every year it's $800. And then there is this, let me see if this link works now. I had a problem with the link. Let's see if it opens up now. This will be in the slideshow when you get it. It didn't work. Oh, sorry. Let me get back to slideshow. It might be that I can't click on it from. See if I can do it this way. Open link in a new window. There we go. I don't know if you can you see this? At any rate, the link works. So we don't have to worry about that. Okay, and you will get the link. Okay, so if there's any questions about this, please, about legal structures, please go ahead and put that in the Q&A. I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So licenses and taxes may be required at any level, federal, state, county, and city. If you have a business, then you have to pay federal and state taxes. Now, this is another difference with nonprofits. Nonprofits normally do not pay taxes unless they have a profit-making arm that makes money for the nonprofit. They might get taxed. Counties may or may not charge tax. Cities may or may not charge tax. I know in the city of Sacramento, business licenses are not required for most businesses, but you do have to pay taxes. So you want to check at each of those levels where you specifically are, whether or not you have to either get a license or pay taxes in that jurisdiction. And again, if there's any questions about those, please put them in the Q&A. Okay, so there's something called an employer identification number, EIN, and that's something you get from the Internal Revenue Service on the federal level. And that is required for anybody who employs anybody. If you have employees, you need one. If you're a sole proprietorship or partnership, you need one. If you have employees, you don't need it if you don't. but all partnerships, I'm sorry, that was for single, for sole proprietorships, you don't, but partnerships and corporations, you do. And it's also recommended for all businesses because, like if you get the number, then you're in good shape for if you have to, all of a sudden you have to hire somebody, you can't do it because you don't have the EIN. So it's good to have it. And you get that on the IRS site. No fee. Just this form to fill out. And you can do it yourself. Okay, so on the state level, so you do your corporation, company, or partnership filings with the Secretary of State, unless you're a sole proprietor, and you pay state income tax to the Franchise Tax Board. And if you're an employer, then you have to pay workers' compensation insurance through the state, and you have to follow all the wage and hour laws and post them in your place of business, where prominently where employees can see them, and you have to follow all the state occupational health and safety requirements. And those are related to the Department of Industrial Relations, and then Department of Fair Employment and Housing and EDD, Employment Development Department. Those have to do with things like information about discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. This can cost you your business and a whole lot more. Just to let you know, the largest settlement with a single plaintiff in a sexual harassment case was right here in Sacramento at Mercy Hospital on J Street. The nurse who was harassed won $162 or $172 million. So you can see that this can be a business, because this can definitely be a small business killer. So you want to make sure you're on the right side of the law about that. And you need to register with the EDD if you have any employees.
John, we have a question.
Yes.
Actually, two. Sky is asking, there were 4 business structures listed. Is nonprofit an additional type of structure, or do nonprofits also have to decide on one of these structures?
No, nonprofits are different. You have to file with the Internal Revenue Service as a nonprofit organization. And so you have to have a board, and you have to have bylaws, whatever it is that the IRS requires. But like I say, unless you have a profit-making arm of that nonprofit, then you don't pay taxes, and you don't have to worry about any of those. You're not a sole proprietorship or a partnership or a corporation or an LLC. You're a nonprofit organization, completely separate designation.
And then Haley is asking, do you have a ballpark figure on a resource where we can check the location specific percentage of tax we should set aside for our business taxes?
I would start with, I think I'm going to show you later. It's probably it's called CalGold, CalGold. I think it's
I can type it in.
Okay, terrific. And that's a very good starting source for all those kinds of information. If that doesn't answer all of your questions, you can contact SBDC and we will find you an advisor who can. Okay, now if you're selling products, so this doesn't apply to services, but if you're selling products, you have to get a seller's permit, right? It's a sales and use permit. I think I've heard it referred to as a resale license, but at any rate, I think they call it a seller permit. You have to get that from another department of state called the Department of Tax and Fee Administration. And I just want to caution you about something relating to this permit. So I applied for one. It's a long story. I mean, just why I wanted to do this. I really wasn't in the business of selling products, but I applied for one for a certain reason. I applied for it like during the summer or the fall. No, I think it was in the summer last year. Anyway, what I want to say is months and months and months went by, and I never got anything from the state saying that I had the permit. So one day I actually wanted to use it, because one of the reasons you want to use it is because you can buy things, you can buy products without paying taxes on them. Because you're going to then charge the sales tax on your customers instead of paying it when you buy the product to sell. And I actually decided I was going to go ahead and buy a product by using that permit. So I contacted the state and I said, hey, did I ever get that permit? Like, what's going on with this? They said, oh yeah, we gave it to you months ago. They never told me. But the problem with that was that you are required to file a tax statement every quarter. So I had already missed 1 or 2 tax statements because I didn't even know I had the permit. So just be cautious when you check in. Like if you get the permit and then you're going to buy and sell something, check and see that the permit's gone through or not, and when you have to file. Okay, so the county and city, they all have different regulations. If you are going to have a business, if you're going to have a fictitious business name, which is also sometimes referred to as doing business as, then you get that from the county, whatever county you're in. And you need that for any business that doesn't have your last name in the name of the business. So if it's your last name and plumbing, or your last name and anything, or anything in your last name, you're fine. Otherwise, you have to get a DBA or what's called a fictitious business name. And like I say, some local jurisdictions require business licenses for certain things and not others. So, for example, in the city of Sacramento, if you're going to open a restaurant, you do not need, I don't think you need a permit for a restaurant from the city, a license from the city, but you do need one from the county health department. But for example, if you're going to open a consulting business in the city of Sacramento, you don't need a license at all, but you do need to pay taxes. So licenses are usually city, sometimes county. And you have to make sure that where you are located is appropriate for the use that you're going to, the business use that you have, right? So for example, most home-based businesses, not involved in heavy manufacturing or something like that, then you can do it in a residential zone. But I just want to give you an example. My very first job out of college was with the Sacramento County Planning Department. They handle all the land use planning and zoning and all that. And a citizen came in and wanted to get a permit to have a beauty parlor in her home. And the permit was denied. The permit department was like right across the hall from the planning department. So we could actually see them over there. They're across the lobby, I should say. And she came up and they told her, oh, well, you need to get she needed to get like a home. She needed something from us. And it was some complicated thing. And I said, well, why do you need this? And I said, I don't know. And I looked it up. And the reason that she needed it was because supposedly she didn't have the plumbing for this business in her home, because you have to have special separate plumbing for a beauty parlor if it's in your home. They have to have a whole, different sink and a different everything, right? But then she said to me, well, I already have all that, because I had a beauty parlor before, but then I stopped doing it. Now I just want to start again. So that was a whole different thing. So you just want to don't take your first no as the definitive answer. If they say you can't do that here, make sure that that's actually correct. And there are sometimes public safety issues depending on the nature of your business. For example, anything that has to do with prepared food, then you have to have something from the county health department certifying that you're capable of providing healthy food, safe and healthy, at least safe, for example. Okay, there's CalGold, and it's got all kinds of information that can be useful to you about permits and licenses and forms and fees. You put in where you are, the kind of business that you are. These are drop downs, so they may or may not cover every single kind of business. Try to get the one that's closest to you, to what you do, and then where you are, and this should help you figure that out. Okay, so we covered legal structures, licenses and permits, things at the different levels of government, and CalGold. So here's another poll. Suyi, can you put poll number 3 up?
Yes, sir. Coming right up.
Thank you.
And Amy, I'm just gonna read the question to you,
Okay.
since you aren't able to see the poll questions. Number one, based on what you have heard so far, which legal structure do you think will be most suitable for your business? The choices are sole proprietorship, partnership, LLC, and corporation. And second question, what is the name of the GoBiz site where you can get all the information you need about permits and license? Choices are CalBiz, CalGo, or CalLicense. So Annie, you can enter your response in the chat or in the Q&A box.
So we have 13 people so far. Let's just give it another minute to see if we have another person or two who wants to complete the poll. So far, LLC is the most common response. Do keep in mind that that is something that you'll have to pay $800 a year for after the first year, but it does shield you from liability, personal liability. And then there's a tie between sole proprietorship and corporation, and then partnership is last. And then let's see. So Cal Gold, almost everybody got Cal Gold. I'm going to end the poll, share the results. There they are. Okay. And I'm going to stop sharing the poll.
And Amy's responses to the questions are LLC and CalGo.
Got it. Terrific. Thank you. Okay. So let's go on. Let's see if there's any other questions before we move on about the legal stuff.
I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Oh,
Okay.
no, that's it.
Okay. So here's what we've covered so far. Self-discovery, assessing your finances, the market and feasibility, your team, and making and keeping it legal structures, licenses and permits, the different jurisdictions, and Cal Gold. So here's what we're going to cover next, going from idea to reality. We're going to go into these in much more detail in the next 4 sessions, including your vision, your goals, your objectives, and your activities you're going to do to reach those goals, how you test your idea, getting clear on your business idea and plan, your product or your service, your customers, your competitors, your location, turning that idea into a business plan and different types of plans and financials. So this actually, don't need to do that again. We already did. Okay, so from idea to reality. So what you want to do is you want to start with the end in mind. Stephen Covey is famous for saying that. So let's say you plan out, you've got a vision 5 years from now. Here's where I want my business to be. Then you figure out, where am I now? So this is often referred to as analysis. This is analysis of where you are, vision, and then you need a strategy to get there. And oftentimes you might want to work, whoops, why didn't that work backwards, right? You start with your vision, you know where you are now, you know what your vision is, and so you plan backwards to see, okay, to get where I want to be in 5 years, what do I need to do in 4, 3, 2, and 1. So again, the vision is your ideal long-term end state. Where do you want the business to be 5 or even more years from now? What are your goals? Are more medium term, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, things like that. They're broad. They might be both business goals and personal goals. They're related, might be related to the business. And you want to make sure your goals are what are called SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So then you want objectives or activities, your short-term steps that you can use to achieve those goals. And finally, targets or metrics. How are you going to measure success? This is the measurable part up here. What are you going to do to get better at what you're doing and make sure your business is successful? So let's take Grandma's mobile dessert truck, right? Great slogan here for the town square and the county fair, right? So Grandma is right now in the pre-launch phase, right? Putting the ducks in the row, working with SBDC, working with a lender. So later this year, Grandma wants to launch the very first dessert truck, right? And then next year, she wants to add 2 trucks. And after that, 2 more trucks and a retail store, right? And then 1 year later, go to 2 more counties and hire 6 people because she's got to run all this stuff in other places, right? And then 5 years from now, she wants to start franchising and having 2 shops of her own, 8 trucks, 20 employees. So you can see this is a big goal, right? And so she needs to do a whole lot of stuff along the way to make that happen. So here's some of the things that the objectives and activities, right? She needs to start her business planning, test her recipes, and maybe try a farmer's market stall. And maybe she got a job now, got to work till she gets $10,000 so she can, buy the trailer and the inventory and start selling out of that trailer, right? And then she has to learn about all the rules and regulations and all that kind of thing. May need a business loan because now she's going to get, buy the truck. And that's much more expensive. And then that gets her to where she wants to be later on this year. But then you want to plan all the way to the end. Someday you are not going to have that business anymore. Either you're going to get rid of the business or, well, I don't want to say it, but we all die someday. So, so she might sell it to a new owner. She might just liquidate it, sell the truck, and then use the money for the truck to retire. The employees might buy it. Or maybe she's got kids, or she's certainly a grandmother, so she's got grandkids, and maybe they want to run it, right? So there's all kinds of possibilities. This is referred to as exit strategies. So you want to test the idea in 3 ways. First of all, do customers want it? So if it's a mobile dessert truck, and if you can get a market stall at the farmer's market, then you'll find out if people buy it. And you'll find out, like, what's the price point. You might start low and raise the price. You might